Hello everyone and welcome to Rob's Rogues, and we're continuing on with my Farewell Mattel series of reviews, and today we're taking a look at the DC Universe Classics. This, I believe, is from the 2-pack with the crystals that I have here. This is the robot suit Lex Luthor, or more commonly known, the Superpowers Lex Luthor. The very first Lex Luthor figure I ever had, which I have somewhere, I believe it's at my parents' house, is the Superpowers Lex Luthor that looked like that. There was a Gotham City 5-pack, Lex Luthor that was also in the Superpowers or Challenge of the Super Friends cartoon series, more comic book cartoon. This wouldn't come till much later towards the end of the Superpowers cartoon TV series. I picked this up at Ohio Comic-Con last year, actually 2 years ago now. Would be the 2013, the first time I went to the Ohio Comic-Con, and I picked him up and one other figure that will be the actual last DC Universe Classics figure that I'll be reviewing here during this little stretch that I've done before we get into the next set of Mattel figures. And these were two on my list that I was really hoping to get, as I did not have a Lex Luthor for my Superman, or a Superman villain. I didn't have Metallo. I did have a Toy Man, but I thought I needed a real big baddie, at least to be able to stand up along Superman, or later on when I did eventually pick up Supergirl or even Superboy himself. Lex Luthor was one that I wanted to get. Now, I haven't taken this head off. I've seen people put him on a suited body figure, so you'd have more of a President Lex Luthor. But this guy is just detailed so very well. I believe this is when he also originally came out in the DC Superheroes line, so the articulation and more importantly the sculpting on this guy is really good. Bits and pieces were used for Mr. Freeze later on, I believe, in the boot department and even in the gauntlet as well. And I think this really captures the 80s Superpowers action figure very well, and it was in the 3 3/4 inch size. I've seen a lot of people review this guy, and was one that I was really wanting to pick up, and I got him and my last figure off to the side. I think I paid $20 a piece, or excuse me, $20 for the pair of them, which I thought was really good. I don't have the box that he came in at all. I got him loose in a little plastic baggie with his crystals. I think originally Lex came with only the Kryptonite green crystal. It wasn't until the 2-pack with Supergirl that they included the other color crystals, and I do have those as well. So I do believe this is technically the 2-pack version. If I'm wrong, I've tried to do as much research as I can. If I'm wrong on that, I apologize. Here is the gold Kryptonite shard, the red Kryptonite shard. I like them better when they're the translucent. The gold just looks like a piece of gold you could give like to the Joker or Penguin or something like that. And the blue Kryptonite shard. And each of these had a different effect on Superman. I can't quite remember what they do now, but that was something that they played up on in the Super Friends TV series, the different color crystals that Superman could be infected with, or something. I believe the blue gave him a little bit better strength, I think, or healed him, or something like that. They all weren't fatal to Superman, which I thought was kind of cool too. But back to the sculpting, the way Lex looks, I like the head a lot. Again, this was originally sculpted for the DC Superheroes line. Just looks really cool. It just has that. They captured the look of Lex Luthor in a way that you're not totally trusting of Lex. And the stories of people getting him elected into president, and Superman constantly saying, why are we trusting Lex Luthor? You would think if somebody like Superman is saying, why trust Lex, then why are we putting him in a position of power? But just the detail on this guy is really good. And doing this set of reviews, getting to a couple of these latter figures, really makes me kind of miss Mattel. That they were off on such a good stride And then it's like, okay, we're going to start mass producing things, and things started getting cheaper and cheaper. But we know how that story and that song plays out. But just the detail work on the boots, even on how the leg hinges, just the detail on that. If this were a tail-end DC Universe Classics figure, none of this would be here at all. It would just be totally bland. This would just be a solid piece, probably like this color, but you wouldn't have all these ridges and designs. The Four Horsemen were doing a really, really knockout job on this line. The tread work that is in the boots, I mean, there's just enough detail in this figure just to make this a very long review in and of itself. This, I believe, is when Mattel was at its finest. The DC Universe Classics line is good, but there was something very cool about the DC Superheroes line at the very beginning. I think those are some of my favorite DC Universe figures that Mattel made. Again, just we got a good 12, 13 years out of Mattel, depending on how you count it. So that's a lot longer than some toy lines run. So even though we kind of complain about Mattel towards the end, I tend to think about, look at all the great stuff that we got beforehand. And finally getting Doomsday and then getting Damian properly released, I at least think they went out on a nice, strong note. It wasn't, hey, here's a Bat Zorro, it's our last figure, you know. I'm glad that Damian and Doomsday were the last two figures released. At least we kind of got closer to the top of the mountain where Mattel was. So let's get on to some articulation here. Now, I know people have been taking off his head, so it must not be overly too hard to get it off, but there's not a lot of room in here. I remember the Superpowers figure, you were able to take this piece of the armor off and pop it back on. There was a little, I think, red pin back here that helped you pop it off and on, so that was kind of cool. But the head does have a good amount of articulation. Doesn't look up very well at all. Can look down and has the nice tilt back and forth, and I like that. Again, I think the head's done really well. And Lex and I have something in common, our nice haircut. He does turn not so much at the waist, but more just up under the part of his armor, which works really well, and it has a little bit of motion to it as well, that it can kind of tilt back. It's kind of its ab crunch, if you will. So it'll do that. The arms are another story. They move rather well. They can't go in the full 360 range. Hopefully I didn't have him off frame here. Can't go in the full 360 range as good as they probably could, but again, you're dealing with this cool, awesome designed armor that they gave him, so I'm not complaining about that at the moment. So you kind of have to make the arms go out a little bit, but still really cool. It does turn at the bicep right there. Single bend at the elbow. Turns at the gauntlet, and I don't believe, no, there's no hand rotation there. I've got him all turned around here. Legs move a little bit. He does have the standard T-jointed hips, but his tunic part here is a soft rubber. It's rather tight on the legs, so it does hinder his movement. So not that he's a karate kicking type person. You can get him in some moves here, but it's limited due to the tunic. Has a single bend at the knee. Has the upper thigh cut, which I missed right here. And has boot rotation and has a very, very cool ankle pivot. Again, I just love the way this ankle pivot is designed. Such a cool figure. And he holds all of his crystal shards very, very well. And I like being able to turn his head and have him look at them and figure how I'm going to defeat Superman. So let's bring up Superman. Now, I did give my DC Universe Classics All-Star Superman to my nephew for a Christmas present a couple years ago, and he loved that very much. And the reason I did that is because Chapman Films sent me the DC Superheroes Superman. So let's take a look at these two together. Such a cool Superman. So I have two DC superhero figures together. It's nice to have Lex and Superman. Chapman Films really hooked me up over the last couple years with some figures. He had bought quite a few of these trying to find a perfect DC superhero Superman. And when we were doing Richard Knapp's Superman reviews as he was traveling around the world, I believe Olivia has him right now. Jason sent me this one, so that's really cool that I have my own DC superheroes Superman, and it's really cool to have him go along with with Lex here. I mean, he does have the standard, you know, very outstretched legs, so it makes Superman a little bit shorter than Lex, but I do think that Lex has an inferiority complex, so these boots, I think, give him an unfair lift here over Superman. But two cool figures from the prime of Mattel and their DC Superheroes line. I believe my figure's almost perfect. He is looking up, probably like Superman's flying up above him right now, thinking, how am I going to get this crystal and kill Superman? But anyway, very happy to have added him to my collection. He's been standing on my shelf proudly the last 2 years now, almost, since I've had him, actually 2 years now. But I hadn't got around to reviewing him because I was still kind of waiting for Damian to be released so I could do this farewell Mattel thing that I had planned out a couple years ago when thinking that we were going to get Damian. And then we did. So I'm a little bit of a tangent here, but this is such a cool figure. Again, this is at the prime of and the peak of Mattel, and not that things went downhill from here. We got a lot of cool figures out of the 12 years that Mattel was churning out DC Universe Classics type of figures, be it Unlimited or Legacy or, you know, all the very Young Justice, all those subsidiary lines of DC Universe Classics. But this is kind of where it started with the 2003 Batman line, then going into the DC Superheroes line, and Lex was one of those creme de la creme top tier figures to have, and such a cool nod to the Superpowers line that this was one that was constantly on my radar. Again, I don't have the box for him. I picked him up loose along with the last figure that we're going to see here from the DC Universe Classics line. But such a cool figure. Of course, you've got to have a Lex Luthor to go with your Superman figure, and this is a great one to have. So today we'll be taking a look at the DC Universe Classics. I believe this is the 2-pack version, since it came with the colored crystals, from the Lex Luthor and Supergirl 2-pack, but originally got his release in the DC Superheroes line. And as always, this is Rob for Rob's Rogues, signing off saying we will see you guys next time.